Welcome back to State of the Association. As always, I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Today we're going to talk about the NBA preseason, specifically on the positive side of things, as well as the return of Lonzo Ball, Kawhi Leonard being out indefinitely. And then moving over to the NFL, we're going to have takeaways from the NFL week probably tomorrow, but today we're just going over the Pittsburgh Steelers versus New York Jets game. Thank you for tuning in. This is State of the Association. Lonzo Ball made his long-awaited return against the Minnesota Timberwolves in the NBA preseason. The numbers weren't eye-popping, but that's par for the course with Lonzo. What you get with him is solid, stable production at the point guard position with good hustle on defense and good playmaking, and that's exactly what Lonzo is as a player. And in his first game back, he wasn't very aggressive. He only took 6 shots, but he didn't need to. And he did what he does in terms of being a valuable NBA player. And to see him be able to do that after years away from the game, that's impressive because it takes some guys quite a while to come back and be the player that they once were. You look at Deshaun Watson in the NFL, he takes a year or so off, and now he comes back, and he's not going to be the same player that he once was back with Houston Texans. But with Lonzo, he was able to come in, and with his play style, he's not too ball dominant. He can catch a three and shoot it, and he can play make for others, but he's not ball dominant in himself. And so as a result of that, he's really able to slot into the offense, kind of plug and play, and making this impact, especially on the defensive end, right? He was making some good hustle plays on defense. And I've never been the biggest Lonzo Ball fan. However, a game like this, whether it's, through the perseverance of even being able to come back after everything, or whether it's the fact that, in that comeback game, he was able to come back and do what he's always done. And that is to lock in on defense and play make for others. And so to be able to do that after years away from the game, that's very, very impressive. And, Lonzo's still not very old. He came in I believe, the 2017 draft. So as long as, injuries don't take him out once again, he's got quite a few years left in this league. And he's never going to be, most likely not going to be an all-star, certainly not all-NBA, but he doesn't need to be. He slots in his role near seamlessly, and he was able to do that, after years away. So it's very impressive for Lonzo, and the sky's the limit for him as a role player. I think he's going to be really good, really impactful for Chicago, because with Lonzo, the impact is the main thing, right? You don't get him for the production. You get him for the impact that he adds, the value that he adds to your team. I think in the long run, that's going to be better for him because, as he becomes even more of a veteran, he's going to be able to mentor younger guys. And so with Lonzo, I think he has a bright career ahead of him, barring injuries, just because of his play style, his mind for the game, and it's great to see him back after struggling so long with that injury. On the negative side of injuries, though, Kawhi Leonard is out indefinitely, rehabbing inflammation in his right knee. And it's always been the same thing with Kawhi, especially over the last couple of years, especially in his stint with the Clippers. It just feels like so frequently he's been injured or just has sat out entirely. And in years past, I feel like it was kind of less impactful than it's going to be this year because the Clippers had another great wing in Paul George that could kind of make up for what they're missing out on with Kawhi Leonard because, PG's a talented playmaker, good scorer, good defender. He can do what Kawhi does, maybe not on the same level necessarily, but Paul George is a great player in his own right at the forward position, so he was able to kind of slot in and make you miss Kawhi a little bit less when he had to miss games. But PG is out of town now, so the loss of Kawhi Leonard, the only guy who really has the opportunity to be that guy in LA now is James Harden. And this is the same James Harden we saw in Houston, winning MVP, scoring 36 points a night, looking like one of the best scorers in NBA history. That James Harden is long, long gone. Now, is Harden's production going to be as low as it was last year? No, because now he's going to have more opportunity, especially with Paul George gone, Kawhi Leonard out, and Russell Westbrook's gone as well. But Harden is not going to be that same guy that's going to be able to lead your team to the top record in the conference, right? Harden isn't that guy anymore, so you need Kawhi Leonard and Harden to stay healthy as a duo for this Clippers team to reach their full potential. But now Kawhi's out indefinitely, so that's not going to happen, and you're not really going to get to see what the potential of this duo is for the LA Clippers, especially right away. And this is a team that, even with guys healthy in the past, has struggled with disappointment. Typically that might have come with injuries, but sometimes it hadn't. Sometimes, they had blown leads in the playoffs. And this Clippers team, it's just been a history in the Kawhi Leonard stint, in the Paul George stint while he was still there. It was just disappointment after disappointment. And now with Kawhi Leonard out indefinitely, and James Harden, and older James Harden, having to lead the charge for them, and now you don't get to see what the potential of a Kawhi-James Harden duo is, especially early on, so that probably means you're going to run it back next year. And you might set yourself up for disappointment once again, and you don't have much time with these guys. You need to know immediately how far this deal can get you, and you're not going to be able to do that. So what happens if next year they're both relatively healthy? Kawhi, especially, plays 60-something games, and they flame out in the first round of the playoffs, or they don't even make the playoffs, right? And you realize, hey, this duo isn't going to be the one to lead us to a championship in this new era of Clippers basketball. Well, you could have figured that out this year, but instead Kawhi Leonard was out indefinitely. So you're going to have to wait another year, most likely, to really see what Harden and Kawhi can do. And then what's stopping them from getting injured next year, right? So for the Clippers, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment once again. And the Kawhi Leonard sit in LA, despite all the talent in the world that he has been a failure, whether it's due to roster construction, whether that's due to injuries, whether it's due to just poor coaching or blown leads in the playoffs, whatever it might be. There's a whole combination of factors. The Kawhi and formerly Paul George sit in LA has been a complete failure. One good thing about the Los Angeles Clippers is that their owner actually seems to care about basketball. And one would think that that's really not saying that much, just because this is a National Basketball Association. All the owners who were owning these lucrative basketball teams, they should, in theory, care about basketball, but so often they seem apathetic. And, they don't want to pay that extra money, so they trade the guys making huge contracts out of town, even if that's, to the detriment of the basketball team. But, with the Clippers' new arena coming in and everything that's been done from the rebrand to whatever it might be, trading away Paul George because they believe that might be the best thing in terms of basketball interests, or the same thing with Russ, they didn't like the production that he had, and bringing in James Harden, and, even trying to run it with Russ and PG and Harden and Kawhi, because on paper that's a really, really talented core, despite their age. The new arena, though, especially highlights it. Just the fact that there's been so many features, and it really seems like it's going to be a great, great arena for the basketball fan. There's one section that's just going to be a huge wall of fans, no breaks, and, that's just supposed to be for the loudest Clippers fans, when the other team's at the free throw line, and they're going to try to stop them. And there's just been so many new ideas coming with it, and it seems like the owner really, really cares about the sport, and that's great to see. Because having an owner that cares makes it easier to have a fan base that cares, because they know that the owner is trying his best in his own right with, all of that he has, all the financial tools available to him. He's trying all that he has to make it the best experience for the fans and to construct the best basketball team possible with what is financially available to him. So it's just great to see an owner that really, really cares. And I think it's good. It would be really good for the NBA if we could have all owners that were like the Clippers owner. Because if that was the case, and all these NBA arenas had all these great features, they had indoor basketball courts, they had just stuff designed for the fans, I think that would take the NBA to the next level. Because we've seen over the years, I believe NBA Finals viewership has been down. But, if owners really cared, then that would get more people really invested in going to the games and watching the games, and it'd just be great for the NBA if we had more owners like the one for the Clippers. So I just want to shout out to them, because it's just great to see in a league where so often we don't see owners really getting involved firsthand in team operations, and when they do, it's often to the detriment of the team. Over to the NBA preseason, there's some takeaways from that. First of all, Lonnie Walker has been waived despite having a pretty productive preseason. And this is a guy who I thought was going to be a really, really key member for Celtics coming off the bench this year. Lonnie is, if nothing else, a great scorer. And especially for guys coming off the bench, that spark can be really, really helpful. The Celtics as a team, especially in the starting five, that's a lot of Swiss Army knives, right? They can defend, they can play make, they can score, they can do whatever. But sometimes, especially with a guy like Jason Tatum, they can be inconsistent on that scoring end. So if you're able to have a guy like Lonnie Walker come off the bench and give you a good 14 or even more, if he has to step in for a guy having an off night in the starting five and he's able to come in and give you 20 plus points in a game, that's huge. And I thought Lonnie Walker was going to be really, really good for the Boston Celtics this year, but now he's not going to get a chance to do that. I thought that if the Celtics were going to repeat, and obviously that really comes down to their starting five, that is an elite starting five. You've got two borderline superstars. You've got pretty much all the starting five is all-star caliber if they were to be, a primary option on a team. Or maybe they're just, an all-star in their own right in terms of how they slot into the team. A guy like Derek White, he's a crucial role player, so he was getting all-star calls. So the whole starting five is uber talented, but coming off the bench, maybe a little bit less so. You've got guys like Peyton Pritchard, Al Horford, but the bench depth isn't all the way there. And so if you had Lonnie Walker on that team, that's a huge upgrade to your bench depth. And if a guy, like the shooting guard, if Derek White or Jaylen Brown went out, shooting guard / small forward, then Lonnie Walker would be able to step in seamlessly. And he's not going to do all the things that a role player should, like Derek White or Jaylen Brown, but he doesn't need to because you've got so many Swiss Army knives on that starting five. If Lonnie Walker had to come in and just go get a bucket, guess what? Lonnie Walker can do that. There was a stint when he was with the LA Lakers, and it was really only for the first. It wasn't a huge sample size, but there was a point where he was averaging 20 points a night, more than D'Lo was. So Walker is a really, really good scorer, and for a team like the Celtics, especially coming off the bench, I thought that could be really, really valuable. But they've went and waived him, and he had a productive preseason, and it's really probably just a money thing. But for the Boston Celtics, I think that is a loss, and I don't know that you'll really notice the on-the-court impact of it just because of the fact that, you never got to see him suit up in the regular season for the Celtics. If it was someone, like in the case of the Clippers with Paul George, they're going to feel the loss of him, especially now that Kawhi Leonard is out indefinitely, because, they saw how good Paul George could be for the Clippers. And you're not going to get to see that for Celtics. So obviously, it's on a different level comparing Lonnie Walker to Paul George, right? But it's the same kind of deal where with Lonnie Walker, you're not going to feel the impact as much as you would PG just because you never got to see him on the court. And this is a team that already won the title. But I feel like Lonnie could have elevated their chances at repeating to win the NBA championship this year. And with him being waived, I think I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to find an NBA team. But I thought the Celtics were a great fit. Mike Conley has really been mentoring Rob Dillingham. Now, Dillingham, as a number 7 overall pick for the Minnesota Timberwolves, he was a very high draft prospect, and, he wasn't perceived as maybe having the absolute highest ceiling just because of his archetype as a real score-first guard, right? And, he's on the smaller end, but overall, he seems like a solid NBA prospect at the very minimum. Is he going to be this MVP level guy? Maybe he doesn't have the upside of that, but he's going to come in and be a very good scorer. At minimum, he's a Bones Highland, right? But overall, I think he's going to be even a lot better than that. However, Mike Conley, over this preseason, has really been coaching up Rob Dillingham and constantly been with him on the bench and helping him out, learning the intricacies of the game. And Mike Conley has been around for so long, Minnesota Mike. Until he made the All-Star game, he was one of the best players in NBA history to never be an All-Star. And he was the primary point guard. He was, leading the offense of that grit and grind Grizzlies team for so long. And I think the fact that he was doing that was really valuable because, Rob, his main attribute is his offense, right? But he'd be better served as well to develop a defensive side as well, especially for a team like the Timberwolves that put so much of an emphasis on the defensive end. So to have a guy like Mike Conley, who was the leader of that grit and grind Grizzlies team, to have him mentoring Rob Dillingham, a great playmaker, a great defensive-minded guard that Mike Conley is, to have him mentor Rob, because Rob can be a good scorer no matter what. But to have Mike Conley, I think he's the perfect fit to mentor Rob, because he can show Dillingham what he's missing on the defensive end, on the playmaking for others. So I think it's just a match made in heaven. And I think that Rob Dillingham is going to be a great NBA player in the coming years and be a crucial player for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And it's great to see Mike Conley really good preseason. That is Zach Edey. And this was a guy who was a really, really polarizing prospect as an NBA draft prospect. Because on one hand, he was one of the best college basketball players that we've seen in a long, long time. He was a completely dominant center for Purdue. On the other hand, though, there were question marks about how his game would translate to the modern NBA. Because he's not this big, wimpy center who's going to go out and take threes and handle the ball. But in terms of being a good center, he'd be great 50 years ago, right? He'd be the number one overall pick without a doubt. But, now it's just more questionable. So we ended up going number 9 to the Memphis Grizzlies. And a lot of people felt like that was a reach. And I feel like I was higher on Zach Edey than most. Because there were circles saying that he was going to go on to do really nothing in the NBA. And I just didn't believe that. I believe that you can have questions about how he fits into the modern NBA, but to say this guy that was so dominant in college and, just in all facets of the game, in terms of what he does, he's second to none at that. So to say this guy is going to be a complete bust and amount to overall nothing in the NBA, I think, that isn't necessarily the way to go. And I didn't say he had the highest ceiling just as a result of his fit, but I did think that he was going to be a good NBA player, and I still believe that. And you don't want to overreact to preseason too much, because some guys have bad preseasons, go on to be great NBA players. Some guys have great preseasons, go on to be busts, right? But with Zach Edey, I think everything we've seen from him, right? Whether it was in college or whether it was the NBA preseason, everything we have seen from him, he has gone out there and been a bucket. He's faced criticism for his play style, criticism for his fit in the modern NBA, but whatever the case may be, when he goes out there on the basketball court, he has went out and been productive. So despite what the general opinion might be in terms of his ceiling, I think that Zach Edey can very well be a good NBA player. And his skill set, while it's not perfect for the modern NBA, he doesn't need to be the primary ball handler. They've got John Morant, for example, Marcus Smart, right? So if Edey's just able to kind of do what he does, off the bench, especially this year, I think he can without doubt be a very good NBA player, in spite of his flaws that he can take away. Dalton Knecht had a great last game for the LA Lakers in the preseason. He scored 35 points, I believe, and he had 20 in the fourth quarter alone. And much like Edey, this was a prospect who was talented, but he slipped in the draft due to outside variables. And while Edey was more his fit and how he would translate to the NBA, Dalton Knecht's issue was his age. But the thing with that is you bring him into a team like Lakers, and he fits in well, because this is a team that doesn't have much time, and you can argue that they don't have a championship window anyways, because they weren't very good last year. But this is a team that wants to win a title because you have an aging LeBron. You have an Anthony Davis who you don't know how healthy he's truly going to be. Same thing with D'Lo. He's been healthy recently, but in years past he had dealt with injuries. And also with D'Lo, you just kind of struggle with playoff inconsistency. So you don't know how long D'Lo's going to be in town. You don't know how long it's going to be until LeBron retires. You don't know how healthy AD's going to be. You want to win another title as soon as you can, and you can make an argument all day about whether that roster is constructed to a point where you can win an NBA championship. But to have a guy like Dalton Knecht, who just in his older age is hopefully going to be able to slot in and play NBA minutes immediately and not be a prospect that you have to develop over years, he's a perfect fit for the Lakers. Same thing with Austin Reeves. He was undrafted, and as an older prospect, he's right now reaching his prime. He's just in his, I believe, 4th year. So for the Lakers, you've got two guys like that who can come in and just be good instantly, right? And Austin didn't have the best rookie year. He also didn't get much playing time his rookie year. But ever since he's got playing time, he's been pretty good for them. So for the Lakers, you've got guys like him and Knecht, and they're going to come in and be instant impact. And the Lakers, I don't know. I don't view them as an NBA championship contender. But for a team that hopes to be in contention with LeBron and Edey, still playing at a high level, a guy like Dalton Knecht is perfect for them. And we let him go and fall to the Lakers. And he's going to be a great and a very important piece for them. To the NFL, Russell Wilson was the Steelers starter this week at the quarterback position. And Pittsburgh would go on to blow out the Aaron Rodgers-led New York Jets, a now 2-5 Jets team. And credit to Russell Wilson for really showing up and balling out, because there were a lot of calls for Fields to be the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And really, that wasn't necessarily what Fields had to do, what he was doing on the offensive end. It was more so just the fact that Pittsburgh, they were winning quite a lot, and you didn't want to mess up the momentum that they had. Because Fields, it was probably his best season as a pro up to that point. However, his production still hadn't been that great. He was kind of more of a game manager, and Fields with his archetype, he's not really made to be a game manager. But Fields was solid. He didn't actively lose the Steelers games. So it was because of that there was a lot of opinion from the public that Pittsburgh should stick with Justin Fields, because at the very minimum, he's not losing you games. And what we had seen from Russell Wilson in his stint with Denver is that he could very well take you out of games at times. Especially when Denver had that great defense. I believe it was Russ's first year there. Denver had a great defense, but Russell Wilson, the offense, could get nothing going. And as a result, he often took them out of winnable games. So that was kind of the fear going into, if Russell Wilson was going to be a starter, was he going to do that here? And was he going to mess up the momentum that Fields and the Steelers had built, despite Fields, maybe not being the most productive quarterback? But Russell Wilson came in, and not only was he really productive, the Pittsburgh Steelers won 37-10. It was a great game, and we'll see how Russ does going forward, because oftentimes, when guys get their first start, obviously Russ has played in the past, right? But when guys get their first start, like Mike White with the Jets a couple years back, he threw for like 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. When Will Levis got his first start for Tennessee, he had like 289 yards, 4 TDs. So when guys get their first start in a new place, teams don't really know how to game plan for that necessarily. Where that's in Russ's case, where the film is maybe not necessarily how he's going to play in this new offense, or with a guy like Mike White, there's just no film on him on the NFL level. So for Russ, we'll kind of have to wait out and see in terms of how he's going to continue to play this season. But it was a great first game. He had a rushing touchdown as well, so 264 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns passing, and 1 rushing touchdown. He was really good for the Steelers. And his connection with George Pickens especially was really notable. So moving forward for the Steelers, I guess Russell Wilson is the guy. As long as he doesn't actively take them out of games and he can be even more productive than Fields, there's no reason for Russell Wilson not to be a starter. If we get 75% of the version that we saw today, that is just as good as Fields was, if not better. And, the defense is still able to key in on that side of the ball. Pittsburgh can be a really good team this year. Do I think they have the highest ceiling? No. But, Mike Tomlin, he's not going to have a losing record, right? That's never happened with him as an NFL head coach. And I think that's likely going to be the case in Pittsburgh again. And they chose to roll with Russell Wilson. And that seemed they've got a little bit of a less optimistic outlook. You bring Aaron Rodgers in, and you want to win a Super Bowl. He didn't get to play it all last year, and now this is the first year where, Aaron Rodgers doesn't get injured on the opening drive of the season, and you hope that Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to take you to the Super Bowl, because for the Jets, they've been in quarterback purgatory for so long, but their defense has been good, and they've had offensive skill weapons like Garrett Wilson, like Breece Hall, like, just now trading for Devontae to kind of get their season back on track after a 2-4 start. But now the Jets are 2-5. And not only does that offense not look good, I think this was the big problem with the Robert Saleh firing. The defense didn't look good either. Because I don't think the offensive issues were as much on Saleh as the Jets organization wanted to scapegoat him for. Because Saleh, at the end of the day, he is a defensive-minded head coach. And regardless of how the offense was doing, that defense was really good, and that defense was able to keep them in games, but the offense could not execute. And their offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, we had seen in years past, previously he had had success with Aaron Rodgers, but beyond that, after that stint, it hadn't been well for Nathaniel Hackett. Everywhere he went, the offense on that team was not very good, and there was one common denominator, and it was him at the OC position. So I feel like Hackett was the one dragging the defense down, and Saleh was the one keeping the team afloat with his defensive-minded approach. And now both sides of the ball look bad. So I think that kind of proves that Hackett is the issue there. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers wouldn't be happy with you getting rid of him, and you want to keep A-Rod happy. But at this point, you're 2-5. You're not going anywhere. You're not winning the Super Bowl this year, and Aaron Rodgers is only getting older. You want to do what you can in this what was perceived to be a title window, and now you're going to have to do all that you can to even make the playoffs. So for the Jets, it's just been a complete failure in the Aaron Rodgers era, whether it was through injuries last year or it's through just an offense that hasn't been very good and a defense that now is seeming to fall apart under the firing of Robert Saleh. It's been a bad stint in New York for Aaron Rodgers, and it had really high expectations. But this team is not living up to it at all, and this team is not a Super Bowl contender. And that's a shame to say, because I was excited to see Aaron Rodgers on a new team, especially, with a breakout of Jordan Love. He's the guy for the Packers now. But Rodgers, his stint in New York has not been good at all. And I was excited to see his connection with Garrett Wilson, but that has been inconsistent, to say the least. So for the Jets, I thought they were going to be a lot better. I think the general consensus was that they were going to be a lot better, but they have consistently disappointed this year. And at this point, I don't know that they're even going to make the playoffs with a 2-5 record. Even that's going to be a little bit hard to do, especially in a conference, in a division with the Bills. The Bills are going to have that division locked up, so then the Jets are going to have to come in as a wild card. But the AFC is kind of loaded as a conference as well. So for the Jets, it's going to be an uphill battle to make the playoffs. That is much less episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you for listening. And tune in to, most likely tomorrow, we're going to have takeaways from Week 7 of the NFL season. But for now, thank you for listening. It has been State of the Association.